solutions for persons with disabilities to be included in our society, whether it is in employment, education, or access to goods and services. They will also tell us about terms of education and training. Stephen is also a sign language tutor. We are joined by Stephen's interpreter, Rayan Hutton. Also in studio today is Joseph O'Brien. Now, Joseph is very active in the entertainment industry and is a motivational speaker, social media influencer, and a DJ. He continues to show the world that it is impossible to define his limits. Now, Joe has been recognized across the media landscape for his accomplishments and is a recipient of a National Youth Award for Personal Triumph. Now, we also have joining us via Zoom Kenneth Surratt, the Executive Officer at the Blind Welfare Association. Now, Mr. Surratt is no stranger to advocacy and has made significant contributions to the national landscape of Trinidad and Tobago. In 2020, he advocated and achieved the amendment to the Copyright Act to have printed material accessible for the print disabled, for the TT dollar to be changed from cotton nose to polymer so that tactile features can be added, allowing persons who are blind to independently identify their money. And he was integral part of the team which won the case at the Privy Council to have the Equal Opportunity Commission established in 2002. His personal motto is strive for win-win situations with the end in mind. And joining us a little later in the segment, we will have Glenn Niles also joining us via Zoom. He is the chairman and founder of the Down Syndrome Family Network. Now, their mandate is to advocate for the value, acceptance, and inclusion of people with Down syndrome, advocate for appropriate policy and legislation, and assist families with the access to resources, support, and information they may need to help their children live full and active lives in an inclusive society. The Down Syndrome Family Network is a recipient of many international awards in the work they have been doing for people with disabilities. Now, this year, the network celebrates its 10-year anniversary, and on Sunday, will host the largest inclusive event in the Caribbean, the Body Walk. Now, before we get into the discussion, though, I want to remind viewers that if you have been discriminated against, you can lodge a complaint with the Equal Opportunity Commission. Visit their website at www.equalopportunity.gov.tt for more details. Now it's time to dive into the discussion. And I want to start off welcoming each and every one of you. Thank you so much for making the time. And I want to start off with Mr. Surratt, sir, because you have some strong views on employment for persons with disabilities and how that employment can have trickle-down effects into the economy. Outline, explain that for me, please, sir.
Okay, if we deal with the end in mind, is that for persons with disabilities to be employed. Once someone is employed, they have cash now. And once you have cash to spend, people will want to improve their service they want to provide. Because now you could pay for your service that lower in your life to a disability grant of $2,000. By the time you buy grocery that you have nothing else. So nobody not interested in you again. Because you could only see on the advertisement, only groceries is offer. Come here and you could get your disability grant check change. By the way, you know, malls say come here and you could use a disability grant to get some clothes or restaurant. Only the grocery offer that service because you have a disability grant check. So we are saying we need employment. How do we achieve that? Most of the time, we'll observe that the person with the disability is not the problem. It's the perception of the person with the disability. So we started with the trade unions. We call on every single trade union in this country, put a clause in your collective agreement moving forward. If someone gets disabled on the job, the company will do every effort to have that person rehabilitated. If that person goes blind, come to the blind welfare. We are going to provide you the training and the tools for you to be re-employed in your workplace. And our services at no cost. So we are saying, don't send home someone on invalidity grant. It is not sustainable. It causes social problem. Imagine you are the only breadwinner in a home, maybe the wife or the husband, and you lose your job. You know what you're going to impact on that family? You could start with divorces, suicide, depression, all the mental illnesses and physical issues you could think about could come in there. So we are saying, let us start. If someone gets disabled on the job, make sure that person continues to work. And you know the government is talking about increasing the retirement age. Once you do that, more persons going to get disabled on the job. So it's more and more reason that the government should do every effort to have that specific legislation to protect persons with disabilities. The second part, we are talking about the Ministry of Labor. Recently, Black River participated some years ago in the National AIDS Policy, Workplace Policy for persons with AIDS. We are saying the Ministry of Labor should roll out a national workplace policy for the disabled. So once we get that done, that is another way we could sensitize the public to employment for the disabled. And finally, we call on all institutions of higher learning, education, please have a component in your HR and IR training component to accommodate persons with disabilities. And well, finally, we are saying at the education level, Ministry of Education, yes, you have a national inclusive education policy. We are saying you need to action that. Don't only have it on paper. We need trained teachers. Teachers must have this scholar go to school and come back and be included in the education system to facilitate persons with disability. And B, we want the Ministry of Education to provide the resources to accommodate children with disability in mainstream education. So those are the key points we want to focus on moving this nation forward so we could maintain the UN Sustainable Goal Development, the UN Charter on the Rights of Persons with Disability, the ILO Convention of Reasonable Accommodation.
And I hear the passion in your voice, Mr. Surat, and the fact that you have all these things and looking as though they can be actioned, so you're dealing with policy. And you said something that I actually want to pass around the table, please, in terms of the person with the disability is not the problem. It is more the perception of the person with the disability or the disability itself. And Stephen, I want to ask you about your experience. How does that tie into your experience? Thank you.
When you consider people with disabilities, they're just like people without a disability, right? They may be different in the sense that they may have a hearing loss, they may have a vision loss, maybe something may have happened with their limbs. You know, but their skills may still be intact. So in my case, we consider hearing and deaf equal. There are a lot of people who say, oh, you're disabled. Oh, I pity you. Maybe you can't do these things. And we're considered lower in society. And I'm not comfortable with that word pity. No, that's not something that, and I feel the same as you.
All right, thanks. I'll ask you, Joe.
It's the same thing here. Usually when I would admit to being disabled, you know, I'm disabled. I'm proud, by the way. I'm very proud. Somebody will look at me and say something like, you know, you're not disabled. Don't say that. You're disabled. You know, you're not disabled. Disabled meaning lying down doing nothing, right? And that's not the case. It's not true. What disabled is me, right? Disabled is somebody, you know, working, going to work, trying to make money, trying to buy their own house, you know, their car, have a family, a wife, etc., etc. And like, you know, disabled. That same conversation I just gave you. If we were to replace the term disabled with a racial term, it will definitely impact a lot of people. Like, you know, they would feel the same way. It's like, yes, I'm disabled. No, you're not. Yes, I'm disabled. No, you're not. And it goes back and forth. It's like, I didn't curse myself. This is who I am. I am this. Disabled is me. And so, yeah, in terms of the perception, yeah, the goal is not, you know, we just want to do anything. No. The goal is we want to be able to access everything that everybody else has access to. We are asking for bare minimum, honestly, and we are tired of the perception being that we deserve less than bare minimum because we are not, you know, because we are not, you know, the minimum that society's perception of minimum. And yeah, that's itself. That's what I have to say.
All right, thank you so much. And Rian, let me ask you as well, please. In terms, yes, we want to ask you in terms of like be helping to be that bridge. So, what are some of the experiences that you have with regard to persons with disabilities versus perceptions of persons with disabilities?
Okay, well, personally, based on my experience, both of my parents are deaf. So I've grown up seeing that gap between the hearing and the deaf worlds. And I noticed that people with disabilities are like an afterthought. They aren't thought about when, for example, you're driving in a taxi and a person in deaf is sitting in the passenger seat and the driver saying, blah, 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 and there's silence. No, there's silence. And as a child, I had to tell the driver, no, my mom's deaf. He said, why are you saying that about your mother? Why are you cursing your mother? And I'm like, no. There's a lot of people that aren't aware fully of what's happening and aren't fully aware that not everybody is going to be what you are accustomed to, but that doesn't make them any less. All things that need to be happening is accommodation. That's what I have to say.
And thank you so much for that. And you know, sometimes it feels as though it can be an oversight, but how do we build a policy to help correct for those oversights so that the persons who this system is supposed to serve are part of the planning and policy making? But with that in mind, I want to ask you, please, Joseph, in terms of accessibility for persons who are disabled, how do they benefit all?
How do they benefit all? Well, you see, the thing about it is like, I can give you an real world example straight off the bat. A single mother with 2 children in a stroller, you know, wants a ramp to go into a building just as much as a person with wheelchair access needs, right? She also wants to be able to walk up to the door, press the button, and not have to ask somebody to open the door for her, right? As was mentioned earlier, the retirement age is going up. An elderly person needs to be able to, you know, reach the 2nd floor without having to climb stairs or probably, you know, getting a heart attack in the process or anything like that. And we all want to get old. We all want to have children. And I know we all don't want to have to rely on anybody else either, right? And we, as disabled persons, right, that's all we want. That's all, and we just don't have that yet. So, more in terms of more facilities, we you know, we have to think about the people as well who you can't see, who is disability you can't see, right? The people who, you know, like Stephen, in terms of being deaf, you know, he needs to be facilitated as well. I'm sure you could give examples of times when he could outrightly see that he wasn't being facilitated, right? And
That's right.
Right, I think you were mentioning to me before about the alarm emergency evacuation.
He says yes. You're saying that just so you're saying there when it comes to the alarm, right? That's something very basic and important. It's easy to have a little red dot up on the ceiling for people who could already hear, but having lights that are blinking at eye level, you know, that's something that you never see anywhere. And when it comes to our safety, it matters as well. It's almost like when it comes to policy, certain things are missing. I think if we come together as a disabled community and voice what is needed, and these changes are made rapidly, it would make much, you know, because if you're making all of these policies without the disabled in mind, without consultation even, you know, just like we're talking about with taxis now. When I'm in a bus and I want to press the bell, I don't know if the bell working. I don't know if I have to shout now, trying to shout and feeling ashamed because I don't usually use my voice. If there's a little light on that bell to let me know that when I press the bell, it is working, and then also the driver would, you know, I would know that it would be much easier for me to travel. So I think a lot more things need to be considered for the blind, for any type of disability, and that would help society improve a lot.
And sometimes it feels as though if something isn't made for individuals, if you aren't in the middle, it's not necessarily made for you. Because like we were saying before we started, we've had conversations speaking with individuals who are visually impaired, and those trees on some of the pavements, I had the experience of butting them too, because I'm looking down for something, because I don't want to step on the route, the same way that somebody who's visually impaired may bump into them as well. But with that in mind and building that policy, do you think there are more interpreters needed, more interfaces, Stephen?
Yes, that is very important. That's a chief point, because they're deaf all over Trinidad and Tobago. And then when you have to pay for an interpreter, that in itself is an expensive service. If you go to the doctor, parent-teacher meeting, police station, there's so many different companies. We need to have interpreters there. A lot of people are like, oh, you're deaf, I can't deal with you right now. Maybe bring your mom and your dad. And I feel like so I can't do anything on my own. I'd rather be independent. I like to come to your company and do something, at your business. But sometimes, we sometimes have to think for ourselves now. I have to go and hire an interpreter. I think it should be a standard at all institutions.
You make me want to ask Stephen to open his wallet and let me see if his money different from mine. Especially when you go to a business, they want your service, or they want their business.
Yes. I understand what you're saying, right? It's when I'm talking to interpreters, and when it comes to a hearing person, right, you don't even have to consider an extra cost when you have to have a little service done. With me now, I have to wonder, do I have to take this interpreter out of whatever they're doing? Even a person who just knows sign language, take them off of what they're doing, and then take money out of my pocket to pay them, and then after that, when it comes to the deaf community, very few of us, if any, are at any high-paying job. So the little money we have from welfare has to be put into so many things.
And with that in mind, let me bring you back in, please, Mr. Surat, asking about the trade unions or just collective agreement aspect of it. How do we get bodies that have voices from so many representation that policy is a little more holistic?
You see, I always believe in awareness, because yes, you might have all kind of fancy policy on paper. My main issue is about how do you action these things. And one of the best ways is to start doing is in education system, especially when as children, when you go to school with, say, quote unquote normal, because I believe I'm normal. I just say, when you go to school, children who presently does not have a disability, children interested in playing with their friends. So once they start to learn about persons with visual impairment, hearing impairment, whatever disability they may have, and we go to school, we ride the same bus, we go to the same schools, we go to the same church, and we are included, then when these children get big and they start to be professionals out there, whatever they do, they will always be considered, I have to make it from a friend something from my friend who can't see, or my friend who I went to school hearing impaired. So wherever they go, even the person who is visually impaired too, when he's designing products or so on, he will consider his other friends also. And one of the best things we must do is to something called universal design. And one of the companies in the world became the richest company in the world because they had universal design. And that product I'm talking about, the company is Apple. You could use any Apple product and it is available for the hearing impaired, the visually impaired. You could talk to your phone without even touching it because it has universal design. And because the owner, Steve Jobs, at that time wanted to make his product to be experienced by all persons, he became the richest company in the world. If Steve Jobs wanted, he could have become the richest man in the world. That was not his intention. He wanted to have a company that his product could be universally designed for everyone to use. You could take your iPhone and turn it into a hearing aid. You could take your iPhone and the person who's blind could use it. The person who is low vision can use it. Why can't we make that across the board? Whatever we design, make it universal design. If you're building your house, encourage young people. You're investing in a house, make sure it is a long-term investment. When they reach 80, 90 years, they could still use the house to climb upstairs. So have that universal design to accommodate you throughout your life. Say a car is coming in the country, make it universally designed. So the person who is disabled could also use the vehicle. Every single thing we do, make it universally designed. Alarm system, whatever you do it, make sure everyone could use it and you will see the benefit from it. Because most product that you create, if you create it for the blind, not only the blind benefit from it, everyone benefits from it. If you are, a lot of people into visual learning, but if you go into tactile learning, there are some students who are not visual learners, even though they could see. So if you design something for the blind, other person will benefit. You take a cut in the pavement to accommodate a wheelchair. Now the person with a stroller could access that now. The person on a bicycle could access that little cut in the pavement. So we are saying, don't feel you are spending money only for a small group, but universally, all of us will benefit from it.
And there's something that you said in terms of a person at this point in time may not presently have a disability, and I think that's such a powerful statement because what a meteor pass you. But we take a short break, we return to the hard conversations when we return. Stay with us.
teachers, kids, communities, it's finally here. The 12 and Under Show is back, and we have some amazing things in store for you. We have top-class artists, producers, radio personalities, and more who will be mentors. Spectacular prizes provided by our sponsors, including cash, trips to Barbados, Grenada, and Disney World. Yes, Disney World, and much, much more. Join us on TTT and TTT Live online every Sunday at 5 p.m. to see who will be the next 12 and Under star.
Oh gosh, Uncle Tim Tim, I can't wait to get to know what it takes to become a star.
Follow our social media pages at 12N Under on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for more information.
TDT News. Committed. Accurate. Relevant.
You are dearer to me than all the stars. So many wish but never reach. 'Cause when I'm falling and all the world seems dark, you help me find my peace. Oh, shun mi ba fishani. Oh, shun mi ba oh, shun mi ba fishani. Arubita, yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Welcome back to the Hard Conversations, where we are speaking about difference in ability, not capability. We are doing so with Stephen Dukran, Rayan Hutton, Joseph O'Brien, and Kenneth Surratt. I'm DK Ronstar. But how do we help? And I say that because sometimes, and I spoke about the oversights a little earlier, so something that may be very basic in the case of you, Stephen and Rayan, having that line of sight so that you can see each other, so that the conversation happens that way. Asking somebody like Mr. Surratt, well, look the form there, as opposed to realizing, okay, well, the gentleman is visually impaired. How do we help? I'll start with you, please, Joe.
Well, specifically, if you notice, if you were to approach someone with disabilities, having some issues on the road or whatever, or what you might, consider to be issues. The thing about helping them is, like, yes, sometimes we want help, but we really want to give consent for that first. Because although you might push open the door for me today, right, plain talk bad manners, you ain't gonna be there tomorrow, right? And most of the time, when we see certain challenges, it is necessary for us to overcome them in order to be, to strive for that independence. That is specifically, but generally, right? The mentality of the people needs to be that, even when a person with disability is not there, that they're still considered. In my mind, I'm picturing, some construction workers. They just recently put up a project, and then somebody puts their hands on their shoulder, and somebody's like, hey, where the ramp, where the elevator? And, we start over. And other things like this, the idea is that, we don't, we don't only affect ourselves, it doesn't only affect us, it affects everybody,
And I really like that point of consent. And it reminds me of the fact that sometimes it's almost as though there's a kind of triggering effect when some individuals see, for instance, like a female driving and they're trying to get out of a space. So someone said, okay, well, I need to give directions and become and be a superhero. Anybody asks you for that? So, and let me ask the same question of you, please, Stephen.
Personally, a basic thing that could be done, if hearing people become more aware of people who are deaf and respect that there's a need for communication and understand that the importance of sign language, not just assuming that what is easy for you, which it would be something that would be understood by me, aka reading lips. So it's important that we could spread the knowledge, awareness, and respect for sign language. For example, in companies or when I go to the hospital, if I let you know that I am deaf, you should understand that if you're calling names out, we're not skipped in line, Sometimes we tend to be forgotten easily and other people are just taken in line. The name is called, we call our name and they don't hear our name, even though we inform you that we are deaf. We are here being independent, right? But it's easy. When you call my name, I would not be able to hear you. So you can call. Keep us in mind.
I see that. You know how much time I call this name? Or even like you go and you're waiting for to purchase something from a fast food place or something and they're calling the order number.
Says right.
Let me ask you please, Mr. Surat.
Okay, I will say if the way you can help is start changing the way how you think about the person with a disability. Start with what in your head the person without a disability. I will just recently Sadhguru was in Trinidad and he said it was more difficult planting trees in people's head than to plant the trees in the soil. We have to change people thinking about how they think about persons with disabilities. People have low expectation for persons with disabilities. In order to change, you have to say, I must have high expectation. It's something we're trying to encourage parents who have children who are blind. Have high expectation for your child who is blind. We're telling the teachers the same thing. We're telling the politicians, we're telling society. The only way to start, or the best way to start with fixing your head. Start fixing your thoughts and rewire your brain to say, when I see someone with a disability, I have high expectation. I believe that this person could change. I believe that this person could contribute to society than waiting on the roadside to collect a disability grant. I call disability grant is a beautiful way that you see the same person who was blind years ago had a calabash in the hand on the side of the road is a fancy calabash. Change that fancy calabash. Stop the ministry of have to take that disability grant and link it to some form of rehabilitation. So we are saying, yes, we're going to provide funds for you, but it must be over a period of time. We're going to give you the tools to be rehabilitated so you could get into the mainstream system. So all my simple way to help, start thinking about the person with disability differently and stop thinking about we are just a nuisance out there. We are not. And we want to measure this thing called disability. If you take away all my technology from me, my level of disability is very high. If you start to give me the technology to function in the workplace, even though you didn't change my visual impairment physically, by giving me the technology to function or the reasonable accommodation, what you have done, you have adjusted my disability to accommodate me. If someone is sighted in a room and current goes and there's no window and the room get dark, who is the problem there? Is it the room is the problem or the sighted person who is now blind is the problem? And we are saying the environment is the problem. The person with the disability is not the problem. The environment. If someone cannot access a building because there's no ramp, or a blind person cannot access a website because it doesn't have the accessibility feature on it, the person with the disability is not the problem. Let us start thinking about the environment is the problem, not the person with a disability.
And you give that example of the light going out, so who has the disability, Mr. Surat, and you make everything just boil down like Baji. But I want to ask you, I want to ask you your take on it, please, Ryan. And in addition, I want you to put in a plug for where individuals can learn, kind of build capabilities in terms of learning possibly basic sign language. Because I remember just telling someone thank you, and that made such a difference. Or being, well, I think the latest, I can spell D-I-K-E, or someone gave me a name, DK. But other than that, how do we get a little better about it?
Well, as I said, it always starts with awareness and education. I'm going to sign for you just now, just because sign language is a different language in itself, right? It starts with education, with understanding that there are many different ways to get one thing done, and not just one way, which is the way you were born with and accustomed with. So that all lends to, just as Mr. Surat said, changing your mindset. If you are more aware that there are people who would get the same thing I want done in a different way, you're going to be much more accommodating and much more inviting, if that's the right word. Because there was a time when, during the COVID time period, there was a boss who was given work done for engineering, right? And he had people doing engineering work remotely. And then when it was time for his business to open, and he met and realized that the person who was doing all the work, just like everybody else, was deaf, he wasn't able to get a job. Because he is saying that at the end of the day, what if something happens to you? I'll be held liable, etc., etc. So if all these things were put into place, whether it be policies, whether it be awareness, all these things were put into place, this deaf person who spent most of his life becoming just as qualified as any other hearing person would have gotten the job. So as again, mindset, understanding what is happening. And now when it comes to sign language now, Stephen himself is a sign language teacher. You can meet any deaf person and ask them simply on the side of the road, teach me something, teach me one sign. All these things show that you are interested and you want to learn more about sign, how to communicate. Because I cannot tell you, let's just say you were trying to learn Spanish and you were never able to hear me say hola, right? But I'm telling you, you have to learn to speak this sign language. That is exactly what happened with a deaf person. You never heard, you don't know how to pronounce the word, but somebody's telling you, you have to speak it. You have to, and that's what's happening. So sign language is a deaf person's first language, not spoken word. You cannot hear yourself say the word. You cannot, and it's so much more dynamic than it is. And the sense and structure, how a deaf brain interprets words, and it's completely different to when a hearing person, when we have subject, object, and all these types of things in our sentences. It's not the same for a deaf person. So sign language in itself needs to be a new language. You can't be saying read lips, and it's not easy to say write it down either, because of how language acquisition occurs with a deaf person. So that's my 2 cents. Yeah,
No problem.
enough. I gave the summary.
But I love that point that you made about getting to the same destination but using different paths, because, and I tie that into what Mr. Surat was saying about adjusting the mind or planting trees in the mind. Because even if you go to the classroom and you, as an educator, and you find this is the way that I'm teaching something, but this student or these students, they learn it a little differently. Is it a matter of bending them to the will so that everyone does it the same way, or seeing how best we can have people learn concepts in an efficient manner, even though they may do it differently, and the way they do it may then benefit everyone in a manner that is a lot more? But with that, I want to bring in, please, Joe. And is it a window that was cracked in and you kicked it down? And this is just with regard to DJing, because one of the things I get a great deal is that you're different from everybody else who has a disability. You're doing so well in spite of your disability. How do you treat with that?
Well, there are people who would say stuff like, you DJ well for, for a disabled person. Actually, no, I lied. You DJ well, how you so? Right? That's what it means. That's what they said. Right? And the thing about it is that that's not my standards. I'm not here to impress in terms of look at the disability. I'm here to entertain. Let's party, let's have a great time. And the thing about it is I also had my issues where, people would tell me that, when I went in to ask people, I'm a DJ, the response was, what DJ were? And for those of you who don't understand what that means, it means like that's absolutely absurd, right? And that in itself, and when people even in other countries, when they message me and ask me, I like your work stuff, I'm like, let's do something. They're like, keep pushing little buddy, and I was like, yeah, okay, well, you could catch me on my radio station, right? And then they'll be like, oh, well, take my number and stuff. It's like there's always some gate that I didn't realize I walked through, and when I look back, I see it. I don't know how to explain it if any better myself, to be honest.
And actually, I think I want to pass that around. And I like that point you make. Okay, well, these standards that you put for me, these are not the standards that I have for myself.
Exactly.
I am trying to be a better me. Take my craft to a level. How do you deal with that, Stephen?
Growing up, I wasn't even afforded the access to formal education, whether it be primary school or secondary school. But my mom, she really had a future and a goal in mind for me, whether it had to be a skill or whatever. So there was an internal struggle inside. I had to force myself when it came to reading, understanding certain words, certain phrases. I had to Google and learn. And after so much time, I then, I went to the dictionary as well. And then as time went by, I became a director, a PRO. Now I'm vice president. I understand some accounting. There's so many skills. And when I tell people these things, they look at me. Because in the past, people were like, well, yeah, of course you can't do these things. Of course you can't. You could just use welfare. Stay with that and be content with that, But I knew that I could have. I went out and did everything on my own. And right now, I'm teaching sign language as a skill. I have classes. I teach these things, and I'm proud of myself because I feel like I am on an equal footing with hearing people. People look at you, oh, you're disabled and you can't. No, I have a voice for myself, and I explain that I can do these things. For example, I feel like I need to be there to protect those of the deaf community who don't protect themselves.
And that is a point that I want to bring up when we return from this break. We're having the hard conversations. Stay with us. We return with more.
Anybody who believe in arranged marriage beside my family?
It's just that some people afraid to give up on the ways too fast.
That's what I like about you. You understand so much since you've been away.
Well, going away does do that to you. It does make you see the world from a completely different angle.
So why you come back to William Trace after 10 years in America?
I don't know.
तुम